Hi guys, this is the Casual Fan. Now Lewis Hamilton has completed 10 years as a Mercedes driver. The first time he donned that Mercedes outfit, it was in 2013, and no one would have guessed the kind of success that waited for him. 6 world championships and countless wins and podiums later, it's safe to say that the decision he made to leave McLaren and join Mercedes has worked out. The 2023 Formula 1 season is the last season on his current contract. There have been suggestions by both Toto Wolff and Lewis that the contract extension is nothing but a mere formality. However, contrary to the rumors that have been floating around, a Lewis Hamilton retirement at the end of the 2023 Formula 1 season is a strong possibility. Now, let me get one thing straight. I am not predicting that Lewis is retiring at the end of the season. However, if that does happen, I won't be surprised one bit. Now, there have been 4 major soundbites when it comes to Lewis Hamilton's contract extension. The first was from Lewis himself when he mentioned in an interview that he was looking to finalize the contract extension before the end of the season. The second development was from Toto Wolff himself, where he said that the contract extension is only a conversation away and he was targeting to get it done during the winter break. Well, as we all know, it didn't happen during the winter break. The third development that we had in all of this came when we had that French outlet Fortune reporting that the next Lewis contract extension will be for 2 years and it will also have a 10-year brand ambassador role. And finally, the fourth development, which has been the most recent one, it has the Mercedes boss Toto Wolff saying there hasn't been any conversation with Lewis for the contract extension. Now, in all these 4 soundbites, what we've seen is a process of kicking the can further up the road. Now, there are 2 possible reasons why this could have happened. The first is that the contract has already been signed and the team is waiting for the right time to announce it to the world. Probably at the Mercedes car launch or a time similar to that. The second could be that the contract negotiations are getting delayed for one reason or the other, or somehow they have not reached an agreement. Now, in case the contract has been signed and the team is waiting for the right time to announce it, then, well, the Lewis Hamilton fans have nothing to worry about. However, if that is not the case, the negotiations are still going on, well, it should be a worry. Especially because for Mercedes, there are clearly factors that could force the team to reconsider the terms of engagement with Lewis, especially the contract extension. Now, one of the major factors for Mercedes when it is looking to extend Hamilton's contract, it is the amount of financial strain it puts the team under. Even if we assume that this Fortune report was way off the mark, Hamilton's current contract still makes him the highest paid driver on the Formula 1 grid. Sure, Max Verstappen jumped him at the end of the season in 2022 if we count the bonuses, but if we keep the bonuses aside, the fixed value that Lewis gets, no driver comes close to it. Lewis has been the highest paid driver on the grid for a long time now. And Mercedes has been willing to give him those contracts because he was still going to be around for some time. He was someone that they were betting for the future. To add to this, he was the star driver on the grid. Not only did he produce some stunning seasons in 2017 and 2018, he was also a global presence that marketed the Mercedes brand like nobody else could. At 38 years of age, it would be foolish to think that Mercedes will not have doubts on how good Lewis will be in his last Formula 1 contract. Will a 40-year-old Lewis Hamilton, the age that he would be in his last year if he signs this current contract, will he be worth paying more than $50 million per year? In terms of commercial success, I think yes, Lewis will continue to be this global phenom. But in terms of on-track performance, there is certainly a question mark because a 40-year-old driver competing at the top level is still something that we don't really know. Even in case of Fernando Alonso, of course, for now it does appear that he's performing at a very high level. But is he the best driver on the grid? Is he at the peak of his game? The answer to that is probably no, he's not, or that we don't know for sure. This is exactly why one cannot fault Mercedes to question how good or how close to his peak Lewis will be as a 40-year-old and whether he will be worth getting paid that kind of money. The second factor that Mercedes might have to think long and hard over is what George Russell was able to do last season. In case anybody needs a refresher, Russell outscored Hamilton last season in what was his very first season with the team. Now, there are many that would feel that Lewis was unlucky or that he did not get outperformed by Russell. Fair enough, let's assume Lewis was unlucky. Even in that case, is it fair to suggest that in his very first season in a top team like Mercedes, Russell was able to adapt and was very close to Lewis in terms of performance? That's the thing. Russell was not blown out of water by Lewis in his very first season. On the contrary, there was a healthy competition between the two, and Russell did end up outscoring Lewis. Looking at the future, it's safe to say that Russell is the driver around whom Mercedes will be looking to create its own setup. Having said that, the question that Mercedes needs to answer is whether a Lewis Hamilton who brings the same level of performance as George Russell, is he worth being paid 18 times more than what his teammate is getting? Now, sure, Lewis is a 7-time world champion and he should be compensated accordingly. But 18 times more than George Russell, who outscored him? In terms of running a business, this variance is going to raise a lot of eyebrows and raise a lot of questions at Mercedes headquarters. Finally, the third factor, something that I do feel is something that probably gets missed in all the glitz and glamour around Hamilton's contract discussions. The last 2 seasons have been an eye-opener for many in the paddock. The 2021 season was the first time Lewis was actually challenged by someone outside of Mercedes for a title in the turbo hybrid era. Even if we keep the Michael Massey debacle to one side, there was one thing quite obvious that season. Max Verstappen was clearly the better driver of the two. To further accentuate the point, Verstappen was voted the best driver on the grid by both drivers and team principals. Even in 2022, Verstappen took the honors as the best driver on the grid. And he was followed by Charles Leclerc, not Lewis Hamilton. In the last couple of years, it has become clear that Hamilton is clearly not the benchmark on the F1 grid anymore. Now, as an organization that is going to give a driver the biggest contract on the Formula 1 grid, these are some serious questions that need answering. In the end, it comes down to a small fact that whether Mercedes is willing to give Lewis the biggest contract on the Formula 1 grid. Even though he is closer to the twilight of his career, his teammate George Russell is producing similar results despite getting paid 18 times lesser. And he is not even the best driver on the grid anymore. Once we break things down like this, it is clear as day that there are some serious questions that Mercedes needs to answer before it signs the extension with Lewis. Now, it is quite possible that Mercedes still goes ahead and signs Lewis. At least I hope that happens, because without Lewis, it's not fun. However, at the same time, I will not be surprised if the two parties are unable to reach an agreement and we end up with Lewis retiring from the sport. Now, these are my views. What do you guys think? Do let me know in the comment section. Thanks for watching and see you next time.